forgot, what was the topic of this thing? Let's see, I'll bring up my docu list off on the side. Let's see what we're going to talk about here. The mini helper. So this thing, whenever you first go into it, you click that, displays the most recent names of credits, and then you can bring up 3 of the first stars of the tool. And then from here, you can access auto smooth properties, which can help you, quickly shade. And then the stars, blank material, blank scroll. I can also probably reveal that there's an ugly truth that we replace this with blank materials, so you can just, boom, assign materials. However, it doesn't work like you would want it to. So we are checking into that, and it will be fixed promptly. But in the meantime, just know that we do have plans for making a slightly more intuitive material entry for people using HOPS. If we go over to the render settings are basically our kind of simplification of rendering and baking, as well as object export. In fact, as I look at it, maybe object export could be somewhere else. But in the meantime, I guess that works. So we look at these, and these are, your options pertaining to the workflow. I should probably do a dedicated video about the HOPS helper, just kind of explaining these things. Also, I'm pretty sure there's a bug with normal that Proxy did not resolve completely. So I should probably send him a GIF of that. Be like, yo dog, can I get that checked into? And we'll probably fix that on the next train out. I mean, I'm pretty committed to there being no imperfections visually in front of my face, no matter how worthless some of these bugs are. Like, I mean, in a way, I almost consider this bug stupid. It's like, why even bother with it? Because we handle sharpening in normals 800 better ways than Blender's normal areas. We shouldn't even have it listed. But consistency, right? So let's send this, and I will say add proxy or AR. All right, so I guess I'll have to acknowledge that as a bug in the video. I don't like glossing over things. I'm not trying to be deceptive at all when it comes to this product. So anytime there's something, I like to just approach it head on, just curtail any sort of emails about it, because everybody loves reporting a bug to me to keep me from playing Animal Crossing. So we look at the opt-ins, and the opt-ins have an entire video basically talking about opt-ins. I could probably link to that. The KitOps panels here, because got that KitOps spirit. You can control click it to jump to the next K-Pack, which is one of my favorite things about this. Also, in our version, we display the sort information, even though it's out of control, with the sort. In my head, I'm like, we're going to deal with that later. We're going to make a sort that has no toggles like this. That's why it can live. We have toggles here for, stuff pointing to Gleb's latest course. There's a group for helping people transition to Blender from 3ds Max. There's a link to documentation. There's a link to the playlist that's basically all the videos of what I call the HOPS canon. So if you're trying to get familiar with hard ops, that's one way to get into it. However, there's also a curated playlist that I keep that's in chronological order. So I mean, if you were to download HOPS and get into it, I'm pretty sure if you watch within 15 videos, you'll be like, I get it. I mean, if I were to teach box cutter right now, click and drag. Congratulations, never happens, just saying. All right, so let's do this video where we talk about the mini helper, where we talk about a bug in the mini helper. Imperfections are just things that irk me, but we've done our best. And also, I can be a bit of a slave driver. I mean, I've also been contemplating on replacing apply modifiers with ours. So, just set up and make sure that this is about to work. I like to blind test it and then get angry when it doesn't work. So, it's like a way of testing everyone. I'm like, you know what? I went on a blind test with this old obscure way that we do things. And all right, so everything's looking pretty good here. Just thinking, is there anything else? The fact that you can just take a cube, bevel it, and just quickly go under the auto smooth panel and just click one button to just set your auto smooth just right. Or even set your auto smooth to something strict where everything's still held. But, let's say that we left it at 30. And, while we're on 30, we just cut this in like so. Everyone's been there. They tried to make this cut happen. It's like a lifelong dream of everyone, like launching a rocket or something, right? So, you just go to 15 and boom, you're set. But you're like, hey, the shading is still kind of ass, right? So, me personally, I am pretty serious about preventing these things from happening. So, I mean, to be in all honesty, my best friend now is Weld. Weld is pretty good for this sort of thing. You give the mouse a little rolly roll and it starts looking a lot better. And I mean, this isn't a complete perfect band-aid for everything, but it's a step forward, and every step forward is an improvement. And we combine enough of these into rapid steps and we start really speeding up the workflow and the way things are done. So who am I talking to? Anyways, I might upload this video too. This is just kind of a B-side of me just showing you all the behind the scenes of me making this particular video. Like, my goal is to do 2 videos a day, one on HOPS, one on box cutter, because there's a plethora of new things going on with all these tools that I just want to talk about in a focused manner. So that way anyone who jumps in, they can just find something to just play with at the moment. I mean, there's still the other tutorial playlists for new users where, you can pretty much master these tools, I believe, within 15 videos. So anyone complaining about tutorials is basically a beginner video. We all have a box. We're on even footing. We all have the same tool. We all have a box. Our policy is I never showcase a version that doesn't exist. I'm so against that around here, which is why we do so many updates. I don't want to be taunting you guys with a version that isn't out there. And I always want everyone's feedback on how to do it better and how to improve things, but sometimes I get a little overwhelmed with the amount of static that comes out. But recently I've just looked at numbers and compared numbers to squilly complaints and realized that, the tool's fine. Like, for the most part, everyone is getting in, learning things, and just making their way. So I'm not going to get off on a side rant, but you know me, I'm a jerk. So anyways, let's do this video. So let's see, we already talked about this part. Material and scroll and light, just random. They're going to get their own videos. Blank light also added to render just to make things easier, because we want our rendering system to feel complete. Like, the goal is to, roll all the way to Box City. And this thing is so antiquated. I mean, the only reason you would use it is because you don't want to press Q. And I mean, do you really not want to press Q? Do you really just want to click and just find your option here? I mean, of course, you can jump into the array, which will bring up the ST3 system that you can just jump in and start playing with and tap into expansive mode and begin doing things there. I'm still working on my Christmas list of plans and notes that I have for making this array more complete, but just know that we're just experiencing a cooldown while we gather all our thoughts and user wishes and everything before approaching it. I guess it's worth pointing out that I did order these, especially like when AR first placed it. I was like, I don't know about some of these orders. I mean, as I look at it now, I kind of wish that I placed some of the orders differently, but I think it's placed in a way that best visually allows you to quickly find what you want. For example, lattice next to bevel visually just seemed to hit for me. I knew that I wasn't going to click the wrong one by mistake. Solidify is at the beginning because that one has an icon that sometimes could be variable to judge. Triangulate's the second one on the first row for reasons of sometimes you quickly need it to interject right before you use a subdivision in the form of quickly converting your mesh. Simple to form is really rare and isn't needed, but still is a classic. Even shrink wrap. Shrink wrap is a little bit of a beast. Like I was just talking about workflows with it earlier that we have built into hops that I've never talked about, and I definitely want to do videos talking about that more in depth. Cast, you know, if you have enough geo, turn it to a sphere, turn it to a cuboid, turn it to a solenoid. You know, what else there to say? Decimate, it's my boy. But when it comes to mods, if I were to try to stack up mods in non-destructive building, I would do that just in HOPS tool, because you have your whole, you know, clip of bullets here that's just ready to just start firing with. So I guess in order to show this properly, I should probably install the previous version of HardOps on the other installation of Blender, so that way people in the video can see, you know, where it came from. I'm telling you guys, so much thought and contemplation goes into these tools, and how to most minimize their keystroke. So I know it seems like insanity sometimes, but being able to look at it more like Lego blocks is probably more appropriate, just saying, because, you know, when it comes to hops, a lot of these things are pieces for other things that haven't yet been assembled. And, you know, it's kind of strange to say, but sometimes I have people working on things that isn't always entirely clear what the end purpose is. Sometimes I just want it made for experimentation, because sometimes to me, I want to experiment with different alternatives of its end goal. So I switched out the folder, and we will just pop open the other Blender and just set this up. And if anyone has to complain about the button looking different, I don't even know what to tell you, because, you know, we hadn't done anything with it. It was just a static idea to replace the old HOPS icon. You know, Blender takes a moment to load. That's the byproduct of having every decal pack and every KitOps K pack ever made, ever. I always make jokes about it. I'm like, I have every pack ever, because I'm on the lookout for it. I really love K packs. So we look at the old one, and the old one was like this. It was just boring. And really, every time I looked at it, I was like, it's nowhere near what I want it to be. And I look at the current one, and it still isn't nowhere near where I want it to be. I want that to be like a welcome mat for people coming into the tool. So eventually I'll get that down. All right, I've been talking for 13 minutes. I'll probably do this one as an unlisted video, keep it somewhere. But all right, let's do this. So, all right, gotta build confidence. Let's think about this. What am I gonna say? What am I gonna say? I'm gonna say words, you guys. I'm gonna say words, and I'm gonna throw those words out there. That's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna use words and actions, and I'm gonna get this point across, even if it kills me. And also, I see that I could probably do a little bit better with my screen capturing on this thing. So let's see. That's probably an improvement. Voila. So now I'm able to record tutorials, and you guys can kind of see what I'm recording inside this Camtasia window here. So not the worst scenario. Glad I caught that. All right. Let's do this. Always follow your dreams. I'm not even trying to model anything in this. I'll probably set up the auto smoothing scenario just to talk about it, but that's really all there is to it. So let's do this. The HOPS mini button is a drop-down that was added to HOPS several versions ago that was intended as a kind of welcome mat for new users entering the program and the add-on. So, you know, you would be able to just quickly jump in. You would be able to experience everything that Sharpen has to offer. Quickly add a bevel, since bevel is kind of one of the stars. jump in and mirror because mirroring is so essential to us. And then you would be able to just add modifiers. Of course, in this version, I'm actually using the older version of HOPS because I just want to show how the panel has become since we just really haven't dealt with it in a while. And over the course of this last release, I did want to make some improvements as far as the button goes, as far as making it more welcoming to new beginners and showing them a lot of what HOPS has to offer. So we'll go ahead and minimize this version of Blender, and we're in my regular version of Blender, and we'll switch over to Box Cutter because I'm just used to always being in Box Cutter. And if we expand the button, we see that the first thing that's added is a button that is labeled the version number. So I wanted to ensure that new users coming in would always be aware of what their version number was, and to be able to click it and always be able to quickly see about information, just letting them know what version is installed and everything like that in case they need to take a screenshot and give us this for diagnostics information. So even right now, this is a placeholder that I plan to expand on in the future. An interesting Easter egg about it is we're also working on an experimental way to control click it, or I believe shift click, and it will display all the add-ons currently in use so that you can quickly share it with someone in order to show them how you're using Blender. And I think this will be helpful for diagnostics as well. But enough about the About button. So continuing on, we look at Sharpen. Sharpen is a bit of a multi-shading tool beast. You can just click it and it will perform something called Sharpen, which will have its own special video in the future. C#, which is part of Sharpen, basically an apply system that performs the calculations of Sharpen afterwards. And then Auto Smooth Adjust, which is a new modal that's been added over the last couple of versions that allows you to roll the wheel and adjust your auto smoothing on the fly, which has shown to be quite useful for pretty much eradicating the whole auto smooth adjust portion of the workflow. With weighted normal, you're able to quickly get your shading absolutely right when it comes to planar shapes. Sometimes it can get a little problematic with bevels, but weighted normal is just one of those tools that modifiers that I'm just a very big fan of. And then Resharp. Resharp will remove sharpening information and recalculate it, which this can all be configured inside of preferences. So if we go down, we see that the modifiers basically haven't changed. The array system is currently defaulted to the ST3 array, which means that whenever you click it, it will put you in a mode where you begin holding control in order to begin making adjustments. And this mode is also the pioneer, in which is the first modal to have an expansive mode where you can press tab and begin, rolling your wheel and interacting with things just via key presses or, rolling your wheel, which is a step forward towards beginning to make a more accessible hops. Down here, we have our auto smooth settings, which in order to just show this in action, I will take this cube, tap into edit mode, and we'll press 2 in order to go to edge mode, select this edge, press Ctrl B, roll the wheel in order to bevel, and we will just tap back into object mode. Traditionally in Blender, when it comes to smoothing, you would go up to the top, you would hit, I swear this thing is harder to do every time, you hit set smooth, and then you go to your object data properties and you look at your normals and you choose auto smooth. And from here, you're able to begin working in what we call the auto smooth workflow. If I press Control Z to undo that, and then Control Z to undo that, we can now see how, our goal was to initially consolidate this workflow into being a single button solution. So I could go in, toggle auto smooth, and play with smoothing if I were to want to step through the process, or I could simply just click 30 and everything will just be set. Under the extended area of the panel, we have added support for blank material, which will allow you to quickly add a blank material to your mesh, and then material scroll, which will allow you to scroll through materials that don't yet exist in order to find something in the ether that could possibly be perfect for you. New to this version as well as an experimental feature is blank light, which will just create a randomized rig surrounding your box in order to allow you to just quickly jump through alternative lighting scenarios on the fly to see combinations of things that possibly could be. So the next part of this panel is going to be the render area, where we can actually choose our engine, Eevee, or cycles, but at this point Eevee is the active engine. I am done with cycles. I mean, once the e-cycle stuff is in and cycles is rendering super insane, then I'm back, baby. But until then, Eevee's where it's at. Some adjustments have been made where look dev has been placed at the top, allowing you to just jump through your environments in a modal fashion. You can press S or use the arrow keys or the minus keys in order to just jump through possible render scenarios. Of course, in my situation, I have all of my favorite HDRs crammed down and repacked in order to fit inside this look dev situation in order for me to roll through them without crashing my viewport. But we also have shading improvements for your viewport. For example, EVLQ is a fairly generic shading system where it pretty much is the way that it is when you first install Blender. The shading is pretty harsh and doesn't show transitions very well. However, in my personal work, I find that EVHQ possesses settings that kind of adds cavity shading and a bit of gravity to your viewport to make it a little easier to just see what's going on. In fact, we'll just go in Box Cutter and we see that this cut kind of has a beveled look to it. In fact, if we jump through between HQ and LQ, we can see that under LQ, the settings are just basic. I believe it's just the basic conveyance of the depth of the shape and the cut and everything of what's going on in the viewport. Meanwhile, HQ adds shadows and just a little bit extra embellishment to just ensure that I'm able to best read the form whenever I'm working, and this keeps me kind of making decisions even more rapidly without the possibility of shading inconsistencies causing obscuring. So if we expand the render settings, we can see the settings that are configured for render. I always just keep it at default 64. I never found jumping this up to 256 did anything for me. And then you can see the settings as far as refraction, motion blur, bloom, and volumetric shadows. Some of these settings are things that are not connected to HQ and LQ, but do come into play as you begin working through your model. So normally these are things that I would recommend turning on by default. But in most workflows, I find that they're not needed and can kind of make it a little hard on my laptop. But, you know, I'm on a desktop, so it really doesn't matter at this moment. So we'll collapse render and go under bake. And if we look under bake, we can see that you have the ability to bake indirect lighting as well as cube maps. So really, we intended this to be a quick way to just get in and just set up your lighting, set up your render, and just begin locking down what you want to present. And that's one way of really getting into HOPS and approaching things without having to use a whole lot of hotkeys. In fact, the export panel is a quick take on exporting by us, where we found that users were simply just trying to get their meshes out to 3D Coat and ZBrush without any further delay. They didn't want to go through the rigmarole of playing with settings. So basically, if you select your objects and you click export as OBJ or FBX from us, it will automatically set it to triangulate the mesh. It will automatically set it to apply all the modifiers, ensuring that the result that you get upon export is the one that you have in your 3D viewport. I mean, of course, geometrical issues may occur, but at least the goal of getting it into your next application for you to look at properly without there being holes of missing geometry isn't so much an issue. And it was just a lot easier to create export settings instead of explaining to people how to properly export your model. For our third tab, we have our modifier helper, or at this point, it's the HOPS helper. So if we press Control tilde in the 3D view, we can bring this up. If you have an issue with tilde because you're international or using an alternative keyboard, this can be remapped inside of preferences, and then saving preferences will ensure this takes place in your 3D view. However, explaining this in context of the button, all of your options from the Control tilde helper are located in this handy dandy button. So, you know, HOPS seems complex, but really we have attempted everything in our power and as much as Blender allows to make things as accessible as possible. And while these settings can be very, very complex and daunting to the casual observer, all of this is talking about the same thing we were just talking about in the auto smooth area of just having quick little prefs to just jump through your auto smooths. We look at this, we just have a few more additional prefs here because it's a bigger area. And then these settings pertain to configuring sharpen before it's actually used. And these settings pertain to booleans prior to being used. In addition to being able to configure your workflow prior to usage whenever you're using hard ops, you also have options related to your object properties to get to these even faster than if you were to fight through these areas and look for your favorite properties. Unfortunately, at this time, there is a small issue with normals where normals is just not expanding, so we'll be checking into that. However, in the grand scheme of things, we have multiple areas where you can quickly get in and configure your normals. So just having one small area just be a little problematic isn't the end of the world, and we'll definitely be checking into that. However, in all honesty, having access to these things is rarely used by myself, and I find it to be a bit overkill. But it's just our attempt to present Blender in its most streamlined, optimized fashion for hard surface and general modeling usage. A lot of people tend to think that all we focus on is hard surface modeling, but really our goal is to improve the workflow in general for getting you all the way to your final result. So we go down under material, and material is something that also has been expanded on slightly for this release. There was previously a small bug where if you were to click new material, it would create a new material, but it wouldn't assign it. But before going into that, I do want to also let it be known that if you were trying to do a Boolean and use a material to perform what's called a material cut, this is the area where you would set up the material that's being applied to your cut. And this is a classic feature, and I take pride in its continued existence. So I'll also show that in action. But before that, let's talk about material. So when you're using the HOPS button, whenever you click on the button, it will add a blank material. However, at this time, it will not add a blank material to the second index slot. And this is something that is being checked into and will be resolved in the next micro update. However, just being able to go in and quickly add a material on the fly. In fact, you can just shift click it to add a glass material. You can alt click it to add an emissive material where we can go in under surface and just configure those settings. So, when it comes to HOPS and the way that we present it, we try to put the best options forward to ensure that you get the best experience when it comes to coming to terms with hard ops and how to integrate it into your life. So it's not so much that you have to use everything that HOPS has to offer immediately. I would just pick something of interest and see how it could benefit you, and then from there move on to the next thing. But we aim to have at least one thing that is something that you just can't live without. And for the most part, everything in HOPS is something that I can't live without. So we will go ahead and just assign a blank material. In fact, I don't want it to be an emissive. We'll change that to principal. And I will shift right click to place my 3D cursor, and we'll just add a cube. And we'll just duplicate it a couple of times and use B to box select in order to select it. And instead of using this one, which I guess we could use this one, let's control click it. And we see that it assigned a random unique material to every object. So it is a rather unique take on approaching materials. However, I must say at this time that it is a work in progress, and over time you'll see it become something rather interesting where we can quickly get in and shade models without a whole lot of difficulty. So by going back underneath this, we'll collapse surface because we don't need something so expansive in our face. We'll go under cutting material, and we'll just choose one of these random materials we've created. And so all I know is that all of these materials received a random viewport color because that is how our material generation system works. So we will just add a cube through Shift A, S, Z to scale, select them both, and we'll go under the button. And then under the first icon, we have Boolean options, which was set up and curated by AR. And we'll just go ahead and just click it. And we see that this cut has received the material cut. So when it comes to material cut, that's as easy as it takes to get into it. In fact, you can see that the color has turned light blue, indicating that this is a bowl shape. It doesn't change anything to the options that show yet, but it is showing that this takes place of our former indicator system that was happening over here on the side. So continuing on, we will go back in here, and under the helper, we will change our material to something else, and we'll select this object, select this object, and under the button and the first option, we will choose to Boolean again. So in a way, this is a pretty left mouse click centric system that we intended with this long ago with it that we never really got back around for. So continuing on with our tour of the button, we also have the opt-in panel, which is something I recommend checking out every so often, especially if there's a setting that you find may be something that is possibly controversial. We definitely aim to have these settings front and center as time goes on for users to quickly change. there's a video all about opt-ins and exactly what they do, but you can see that in my situation, I have 2cam jump set up and viewport plus set render, which ensures that if I add a blank camera, it will jump to the camera, allowing me to quickly adjust it. And if I were to go and adjust my viewport, upon left mouse click, it will set that as my render settings, saving an abhorrent amount of clicks. So the opt-ins is something with its own special video that I'll be going over. Well, I already went over it. I'll just put the link in the description. The next panel is the KitOps panel. KitOps is one of our children tools, and it's a tool that means quite a bit to me. One of my favorite things in KitOps is control clicking in order to jump through various K-packs, and then just clicking through to just look at different inserts. In this case, I'm showing the HardOps classic inserts, which is where the classic inserts of HardOps went, in case you're ever wondering how to get back your inserts as far as HardOps is concerned. The last but not least panel is the help panel. And this area, I believe, could probably be put a little bit more forefront for assisting users. But whenever it comes to learning HardOps, we want to put links in here from time to time that assist users in getting to where they need to go. For example, at this time, Gleb has a new course out, 50 Modeling Issues from Hell, and we've taken efforts to ensure that he gets a little bit of a push, because he's actually done a bit for creating content for HOPS. I'm very happy with him and 80 taking the time to actually learn our tool and talk about it without fear and criticism, because it takes a lot to spend time learning a tool, and I spend a lot of time learning everyone's tool, and I definitely take everyone's time very seriously when it comes to them learning this tool. So we definitely want to facilitate that process. I have a friend of mine who also runs a transition group on Facebook where it's intended for users coming from Max and Maya to transition over to Blender a little easier with content that's a little more curated to their sensibilities. There's also work in progress documentation that forever is perpetually out of date due to the work that is always at hand. In my opinion, it's better for us to continue moving forward than to just completely freeze up and be inundated with working on documentation. However, it is something that is my job and I should be working harder on it. So I definitely plan on making all these mini videos to assist with making content on it in the future. Whenever it comes to a release, anytime you're curious on what is new, there's something called a release log. I aim to update the release log often to let users quickly jump in and see what is new, what has changed, to just quickly get them up to speed on what is changing with the tool. When it comes to HardOps, there are always videos being made to explain how things are working. And these videos are kept in curated playlists to ensure that new users can come in and quickly learn, and casual users of the tool who have been long-time users can get up to speed and quickly get in and play with what's new and just have fun, who are here for the kind of amusement park aspect of things. Of course, another link to our manual. And then there's a classic video playlist, which is a playlist of videos from older versions of HardOps in case people are wanting to see kind of how HardOps used to be in comparison to how things have gotten now. The user gallery is a curated gallery of awesome users and their epic work that I do my best to update frequently, but I just get so much awesome work thrown in my face from just users of every direction that sometimes it's hard to keep updated. But I consider it the Hall of Fame, the top row of HardOps users, in my opinion. And everyone there holds a special place in my heart, and I look forward to adding more people to that list. If you're using HardOps and you have no idea of what to do, the challenge board is right for you. By going under the challenge board, it's a Pinterest board of basically images that I've collected online that will challenge you in your modeling and understanding of HOPS to just kind of give you some ideas. There's also a Facebook group and a Discord channel when it comes to connecting with other users and learning how to use the tool. Learning the tool alone can seem like a daunting task, but by making friends and connections, it can definitely become a lot easier. And then, of course, a guide to how to use the latest box cutter. So that wraps up basically how the button works in HardOps. And I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys next time. So that was a single take recording I'm glad it worked out, you know. Oh, I could take off this lapel mic now, I guess. I got so many microphones, you guys, because so many people were like, your mic, your audio sucks. So, you know, I go through and I double check and listen to the audio, and I'm like, you know, maybe these people are right. Maybe the audio does suck. But people have put me on point with audio equipment, and now I'm happy to report that I probably sound the best I'll ever sound. I mean, anything that sounds bad now is just my voice sucking. So, you know, the first video I'll put out is, you know, the one I just made. And earlier I found out that I had 2 tags inside of this thing. And so we want to not let that happen. Here we are saying rendering with hops, which is a lie. So let's transition that to fade to black, like Metallica. I was about to hum the tune, but I'll get copyright claimed. And I did so good. In fact, like the songs for the intros is done by this guy, Skin Vibes, who his song is so good that I want to make a special ad that has like robots in it. So that's why I want to get all these beginner things out the way, because you know me, I actually like hitting y'all with the links when I get hit with the questions. So that way I can continue modeling stuff. Like my goal isn't to cut cubes, you guys, it's to cut freaking robots. And the tools are so insane for robots. Like some people I see are getting it. They're like, man, HOPS is on something. I get it. And, you know, I'm hoping that, you know, these videos kind of enlighten y'all to some of the reasons on why we made the tool the way we did and some of the choices that were made. I mean, it's not all randomness and insanity. I'm telling you, I got this vision in my head. And every time I tell someone the big picture, I either get a bunch of reasons why it's not possible, which, you know, I mean, it's good to know why it's not possible. I also need to know how to make it possible. You know, I call them no coders and yes coders. Like, you know, that's why I like Proxy so much, because I'm like, hey, Proxy, I got this idea. He's like, well, that would be tough, but you could do it like this. And I'm like, oh, snap, you could do it like this. It's like, I could do it like this. In fact, I'm doing it like this right now. I'm like, oh my God. Well, oh my God. I mean, it's a pretty exciting thing to see in action, to just say an idea. And it just, I mean, there's not a lot of things in this world that you can do that with, right? Like if you wanted to make a model a reality, you would have to make the model right, take like 40 hours, which is why we exist. We're trying to make that time shorter. And then, you know, you want to fabricate it, right? You want to print it. And it's like, that's another like 50 hours in a 3D printer with like chances of failure. But when you're dealing with coding and coders who know what they're doing, it's just like, you can see something come to life as you're talking about. It's like, okay, it's like this, but also like this. And they're like, okay, that's an if check. And like this, like another if check. And, you know, just magic. So, I mean, sometimes I feel like I'm addicted to software dev. I mean, I'm a meerkat around a bunch of meerkats. You know, I always say that around team. I'm like, you know, I'm like the weakest link that should be replaced. Because everyone is so smart. But, you know, I think I found a place on the team that keeps me essential. You know, I'm an essential employee. Or at least that's what I tell myself. But I am often, you know, being talked to about coding fundamentals. I mean, I always brag about how I felt college coding, and now I'm dealing with coders all the time. And, you know, I'm still no better a coder, but I learn something new every time. Like I'm telling you, once I learn such things, it's game over. I mean, I always warn the team. I'm like, once I am a expert coder, able to execute my ideas at the same way that I see you guys execute them, it only is going to mean y'all are going to have more work. I'm going to be like, hey, I need y'all to clean up these messes I've created in code, because it happens all the time now. I just, you know, sometimes I'll stare at a chunk of code and I'm like, that could be something awesome. And in a way, that's how Smart Apply got made. Like Smart Apply, I was looking at some code in Box Cutter. I was like, Proxy, how would you make this do this? He's like, you just do this. And I'd be like, how do you make it do this? He'd send me another line. He's like, you make it do this. And then I was like, well, you just helped me make Smart Apply. I mean, it's so crazy working with coders sometimes. Like, I can just have people make things offhand, crucial things that I feel would change the world. But just offhandedly. But it's like, but the idea, gotta plant the idea. I don't know, just a magical thing to me. So, you know, I'll spend this time talking to you people. I'll spend my time talking to you people, all right? You modeling people, you people who chose to watch the extended 40-minute version of me just monologuing. But, you know, in the extended version, I guess we could maybe even think about doing some extended versions because it probably shed so much more insight if people could even opt in for the longer version of a video. But material cut here, you know, I never use it like this. In fact, when it comes to material cut inside of Box Cutter, I still want blank material to be a thing. I mean, it drives me nuts that it's not a thing yet. In fact, to create the illusion of blank material, you know, we're just killing time while we're waiting for this thing to process. Don't need that operation. We'll just draw some boxes, press Q, and under the Alt M, we will just control click blank material to give this some random combinations. And let's say I wanted to cut, but I wanted material combinations. You know, you can press X to do slice. And you see how my shape is a wire. That's because I press H to hide it. Whenever you're doing material cuts, you don't want solid shape showing because you never see what your index is. But you press M, you're going to cycle through materials. So now I'm just doing material cuts, and we could just press M and just get different combinations. In fact, it took over the main shape because the main shape just had weak integrity. It had nothing. And I wish that it was displaying the material name that was being cycled to in this case. Like I'm working on a second incentive inside of HOPS. You know, right now the notification system you see is like V1, but you know, sometimes I have to have the team help me make a system without them being fully aware of the system that they aim to create. But I aim to definitely create some sort of notification system that makes these tools more informative. I feel that I should be able to just exude information just through casual usage of this tool, freeing me to make the most complex models without even the most beginnerest of beginners getting left behind. I mean, sometimes I sound like I'm hateful on beginners or something. It's not even that. I'm more hateful on myself for failing to be able to properly educate people at the speed in which they wish to be educated because, you know, their frustrations are definitely an indication of their passion and excitement of wanting to get into Blender, get into Booleans, and just start having fun. And just notice that it's just cutting these colors in there. So I'm just going to select these boxes with box select, get rid of it. We'll try that again, and we'll select these and delete it. And by selecting everything here, we'll just bevel. And while we're in bevel, we'll just you know, press 1 to set the settings to default-ish. And we can actually go under add modifier and just hit it with a weighted normal just to prevent any sort of shading issues. And if we just jump into rendered mode, we can see that this shape is the odd man out. So we'll just roll that combination with material scroll and bada bing, bada boom. In fact, we'll add a plane S80 G-1 and turn this into a Q box demo, you guys. So we'll just scroll this through some combinations. We'll deselect, press Q, add a camera. We'll lock in our camera exactly where we want. We'll press Alt V. And this isn't a tutorial talking about HDRs yet. That's probably going to be tomorrow, but we'll just find an environment that we like. You know, I don't even need my list at this point. I don't even need the full UI at this point. I don't even need the help at this point. You know, whenever I'm done teaching HOPS on a beginner format, you know, this is the way I tend to use it that you see now, where there's just a micro UI. You know, I probably press the one where it stays in place, but this is the version that I opt to use whenever I'm, you know, working professionally. So, I mean, the goal is to have everybody get to the point where they don't need help and they don't need all this information up. I mean, I guess it's information overload, which is why we're talking about a soft reboot of our approaches of certain modifiers internally to have less hotkeys. But sorry, I'm blabbing too much. And just finally, to top this off, we will just blank some lights up in here until we get a combination we like. And we look at our render settings, and our render is already set. So that means if I press F12, my render is a done deal. You know, I should go and play some Animal Crossing now. And that is how a cue box is made. I love making these cue boxes, you guys. Like, there's just something about them. I'll just select pieces, step them. And I mean, it's a favorite way to start my day and end my day. I mean, once you have a beautiful box and you're cutting it and the box is pretty and you feel pretty, you know, no one can stop you. You're ready to take on the city. You're ready to go have a drink with Samantha. Just call it a day. Just something about just selecting a shape, pressing Q and stepping. And I mean, this is the extended video. You definitely didn't tune in for continuity. Tuned in for the kind of behind the scenes on what goes on. On this one, you can see I didn't step it to another level. And on this one, you can see that because the bevel's a uneven number, it didn't come out good. So we could actually remedy that by just changing the material to be something a little more reasonable. And that should actually ease it just slightly. And we'll actually bring that modifier back because any surface imperfection is a surface imperfection. So, you know, I always tell people about the art of cutting corners. Once you minimize your cutting corners to the most minimal of corners that don't matter to where people are looking, then you become more professional. But if you're cutting corners in areas like design and form and things like that, it's definitely going to hurt you. So I apologize for this mini rant. I will just save this as QBox because that is how I roll. And we're on QBox 105 here. And, you know, we'll just let the rotation play on the way out. So I thank everybody for watching. Sorry about any rants that I had unintended. I value everyone. I'm out.